Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our NFL Week 9 recap. Lots of crazy games happened this week, but before we jump into those games, just a few injury updates that we have here. First of all, Giants quarterback Daniel Jones goes down and is out for the season with a torn Achilles. And keeping on the trend that this whole season has seemed to have of torn Achilles, the Vikings running back, which we just traded for this season, Cam Akers, is going to also miss the rest of the season with the torn Achilles. So the Vikings running game had finally found a little bit of a spark. And now the spark is gone again, but I believe we're going to get Kene Nwangu back here soon, and I think that we'll see an uptick in plays for Ty Chandler, which is a second-year guy out of UNC that the Vikings have. So it's definitely a bummer, no doubt about it, but it'll be interesting to see what other younger guys step up.
It'll be next man up for the Vikings, and when they won't be able to go out and trade for, a Cardinals player and put him in 3 days
Tuesday,
later.
Yeah.
It should be their own guys, their own practice squad guys stepping up next.
It should be interesting to say the least. So now to jump into our games, I'm going to let Callan take it first with the Packers game in which the Los Angeles Rams went to Green Bay to take on the Packers. And the Packers win in a pretty dominating fashion by a score of 20-3.
Yep, we finally won one. We got a break on the losing streak at 4 games. It's been a while. We haven't won since that Saints comeback. So it's good thing we won that game because it'd be a really long time in between wins otherwise then. But we finally got that running game going with Aaron Jones. He touched the ball almost 20 times, which everybody has said that's the formula to winning is to get Aaron Jones the ball more often. And we finally did. And look at the outcome here. But also unheralded is the Packers defense who shored up that run defense like I asked them to do. So they were able to hold the Rams under 100 yards rushing. We did end up playing Brett Rippon. Matthew Stafford did not play. So we did play Brett Rippon, and he looked like a backup quarterback, as he would. He had some decent throws and some here and there, but that pass defense for the Packers was just too much. And really a shout out to Carrington Valentine, who held Cooper Kupp to just 1 catch for 32 yards on coverage on him. So that's pretty good for a rookie 7th round draft pick.
Oh, definitely. You guys, of course, had just traded Rasul Douglas that week, and then you were going against a stellar wide receiver group there with the Los Angeles Rams. It's really impressive what that secondary is able to do with a lot of young guys in there. And Jerice stepping back up a little bit after having a rough couple of weeks with some back spasms and back injuries holding him back. But yeah, Matthew Stafford must have been really hurt if there wasn't enough painkillers to get him out there to face the Packers. But nonetheless, a good win by the Packers, and it is so amazing to break a 3-4 game losing skid. I know how it felt when the Vikings finally got that shitty looking but win against the Panthers earlier this season. So good stuff there by the Packers. Speaking of the Vikings, moving on to the Vikings game in which Minnesota headed to Atlanta to take on the Falcons and won in a thriller by a score of 31-28. And of course, the big storyline here, Callan touched on a little bit already, was our Joshua Dobbs coming in there and after being traded for on Tuesday of last week, was able to lead this Vikings offense to a win in the final 3 quarters. Jaren Hall went out with a concussion late in the first quarter, which did lead to our first points of the game, his drive, but then our Joshua Dobbs, I was going to say took over from there, but he actually started with his first 2 drives being fumbles, if I'm not mistaken, fumbles that we lost. So it kind of looked like it was just a lost cause to say the least. But he has that clutch gene. He was in Arizona all year. He knew what it took to win when you were losing because that's all he ever did with the Cardinals is when he was losing. That's the only time he got to play in Arizona. So he had some experience there. He was able to lead the comeback. We actually had a lead for a little bit, 24-21. The Falcons were able to score a touchdown and take the lead again, 28-24. But then Josh Dobbs led the game-winning drive with a little over 2 minutes left and 2 timeouts. He ended up throwing a touchdown to Brandon Powell, which was his only throwing touchdown of the game, but he accompanied it with a rushing touchdown. I hate to just sit here and talk about Josh Dobbs, but it was really his show out there. I mean, Cam Akers went out with an injury. The Falcons played pretty well too, so it was not even like they were just going against a super bad team. In fact, they're going against a really stellar defense with Atlanta, especially being in the dome there in Georgia. So really good stuff overall by Josh Dobbs. That's all I gotta say.
It really was. I can't believe you guys win these kinds of games. This is reminiscent to me of that damn Colts game last year a little bit, just in the sense of, by NFL standards and football, you don't get a guy with 7 days or less of planning and game planning and expect him to go out there and perform like he did. You know, I had heard or read that Kevin O'Connell was basically translating the plays to Josh Dobbs in the middle of the huddle while the play clock was running and the game clock was running. So he would call the play out in the huddle. The rest of the players would know what the play is, and then Kevin O'Connell would have to explain basically the logistics of the play to Josh Dobbs. That's just way too much. And, you know, hats off to Josh Dobbs for being able to process all that and be able to go out there and perform on really such short notice.
It's really impressive stuff. And I said it. I said he's so used to playing unprepared and used to playing in bad situations that whole time in Arizona, and he actually played pretty damn well. So he's going to get even better weapons in a better situation. I said I like how he looked, so I think we start him next week. I don't know. Now we have Nick Mullins coming back, so it's kind of a toss-up on what we want to do. So to move on to the next game, we're not going to do Callan's game of the week. We're going to do my game of the week first, because we're already talking about my game of the week. My game of the week is the Minnesota Vikings Atlanta Falcons, because I know I just sat there and talked about Josh Dobbs, so we'll just pretend like I didn't just talk about him for 3 to 5 minutes straight there, and talk about some of the other really good players in this game. Taylor Heineke came out in his first start for Atlanta for this year and played pretty damn well. He had,
better than Ritter,
I want to say 2 passing touchdowns. One was a super long screen to tight end Jonnu Smith, but still goes down as a passing touchdown for him. And another player that I really want to point out is back on Minnesota's side, but it's backup left tackle David Quessenberry. He was going against a pretty good defensive line in general there in Atlanta, but especially having to go up against veteran Calais Campbell. But he stepped up when Christian Darrisaw got ruled out and played really well. He was able to give Joshua Dobbs not a ton of time, but enough time for Joshua Dobbs to do whatever crazy shit he did throughout the game. But overall, I mean, just outside of the whole Josh Dobbs crazy storyline thing, it was nonetheless just a really good game in general.
It really was. The Falcons, I really thought would walk away with this one just because they were playing a rookie quarterback or a quarterback on short notice. But the Vikings had the right game plan to put it all together. And the Falcons, you know, they did their best to make it a game. And, you know, they really need to target Kyle Pitts more.
They do. Yeah.
They use Jonnu Smith like they should be using Kyle Pitts. I'm pretty sure Jonnu Smith is one of their leading receivers.
Throughout the first 8 games, yeah.
And he's their number 2 tight end, or supposed to be their number 2 tight end. Even Drake London was out this game. And Kyle Pitts had a couple of catches, but I feel like with that man's athletic ability, he should be a centerpiece of your offense.
Yeah, I mean, when you take the 4th overall pick back in 2021 like they did on a tight end, you need to make that tight end a mainstay in your offense. You can't have him be playing second tight end in your offense. That's just insane. A little bit of a regression by the Vikings defense, I thought, but I think we'll step back up later. They were in a crazy situation too, just crazy storylines everywhere. But now moving on to Callan's game of the week, and it is the Germany game, which
Mhm.
featured the Miami Dolphins and the Kansas City Chiefs, both heading to Germany, and the Kansas City Chiefs picking up a win by a score of 21-14.
And it's a bit of a surprising win because I thought the Dolphins and Chiefs game would be more of a shootout, but instead the Chiefs defense was able to hold the Dolphins to their lowest point total and lowest total offense total of the year so far. So that is very surprising, and they did it without many turnovers. They just forced a lot of punts. There was a lot of punts this game, which was surprising for a game that's supposed to be a shootout. And really, it all changed on one play. The Tyreek Hill fumble forced by, I can't remember who it was forced by, but it was picked up and then lateraled to Brian Cook, the Chiefs safety, who took it all the way to the end zone. Now that's a 14-point swing because the Dolphins were almost into the red zone at that point. So it was a long return and a long touchdown, and the Dolphins were never able to recover from that fatal mistake.
Yeah, pretty easy math to do there. A 14-point swing in a 7-point game is a pretty damn big swing, to say the least. But yeah, the Chiefs came out and shut them out in the first quarter and then put up 21 points themselves. So it goes into halftime, you thinking that this game is over and the Chiefs have completely dominated. But then the Dolphins are able to shut out the Chiefs in the second half. They just aren't able to put up those 21 points themselves. They only put up 14. Like you said, the difference there truly was that one defensive touchdown, which you can see a lot of the time. A defensive touchdown is a huge momentum swing, but overall a pretty damn good game. I sadly didn't get to catch all of it. I got to catch a good chunk of it, but yeah, there was between the second quarter and a little early into the third quarter, there was a span where there was like 8 straight possessions with punts or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Absolutely crazy for a shootout game.
I got up and watched this game. I was expecting an exciting shootout, and I almost dozed off a little bit, but that one play, it was very exciting, and especially with the lateral and everything, and you just don't see that very often, and that doesn't work very often. But
in fact, usually it's the opposite of what it screws them over.
It does.
But lots of craziness this week, lots of good stuff. That was our thoughts on it. Make sure to stay tuned in until tomorrow when we do our NFL Week 10 predictions. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.